Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name's Jeff Thomas, and we have a very special guest with us today, Ron Blue. Now, Ron, really, in my opinion, needs no introduction. Maybe he does to some of you, but he is an entrepreneur, an author, a speaker who's dedicated more than 40 years to equipping Christians with biblical financial wisdom, helping them pursue greater contentment, generosity, and lasting kingdom impact. For me, the most important thing about him is it's just been a privilege for me to call him a friend and a mentor, and I'm really just thrilled with having him on today. Ron, welcome to the program.
Well, thanks, Jeff. I'm looking forward to it very much.
Yeah, this is going to be fun.
Okay.
Now, Ron, we always start with kind of growing up, just for some context and that sort of thing. Where did you grow up? What was your family like? Was there spiritual formation happening, entrepreneurial things happening, or none of the above?
Well, I grew up in Lafayette, Indiana, which was a town of about 50,000. It's where Purdue University is located. And my dad was a factory worker. He was a foreman in a factory. And my mother was an immigrant, really, from Holland, and had never gone past the 8th grade. And so I kind of grew up in I would call it a lower middle class family. We had enough. We always had enough, but we never had excess. And I grew up in a Christian home in that we went to church whenever church was open, and I went to a grade school. Well, there was a Christian grade school. And then I went from a class of 12 in the 8th grade to high school, which was, and my class in high school was 600. And I'll never forget walking into that school the first day and not knowing hardly anybody and being just overwhelmed. But I set out to, I was an athlete, not a terrific athlete, but I played football and baseball in high school, and eventually I became the senior class president. So I had a really positive growing up time, and I grew up in the 50s, and then the 50s was a whole different time than today, for sure, in terms of values, really. I mean, this was after World War II, and we had all of these men that had gone off to war and come back and started businesses, and very entrepreneurial time. But kind of characteristic of the time was I worked one summer helping to build homes. Well, the homes at that time were maybe 1,000 square feet.
Oh, right.
And they didn't have a garage.
Right.
And if you had a garage, you're pretty wealthy. And if you had, nobody had two cars.
Right.
I mean, it was one car. My mom never had a driver's license. So I grew up in this Christian home, but it was very rigid. And I had an experience which I think shaped me a lot. And that my dad and I had spent one winter, building a soapbox derby.
Oh, yeah.
I was 12 years old at the time, and was going to race on this soapbox derby. And so the day of the race came, it was a Saturday, and it rained, and they postponed the race to Sunday. Well, the church I went to didn't believe in doing anything on Sunday.
Oh, sure.
And Dad and Mom had a decision to make, and they allowed me to race. I went down one time, lost first heat, and I was done.
Yeah.
Monday night, the elders from the church showed up at our house to call Dad and Mom on the carpet.
Wow.
And that marked me.
Interesting.
It really did, and I mean, I'll never forget it. I remember the emotions, I remember the circumstances, and it was. I didn't consciously make a decision at that time, but I think maybe subconsciously I did, and that was I was not going to live that way.
Mm.
And uh, so uh, I had a typical growing up experience with certain events. Okay,
Right.
and athletics was really important. It was a small town, and the high school I went to was a very athletic high school. So playing football and baseball and uh, was something that was significant.
Well, it helps with the social part
Oh
too.
yeah,
Yeah,
oh
right.
yeah,
You
yeah,
fit in when you do that, generally, right?
exactly.
Right.
And I have great memories of
Yeah.
that. And so uh, uh, and none of my family had gone to college. So when I went to college, I went because it was the thing to do.
Oh,
Okay.
really?
I mean, I didn't know why I was going to college,
Right.
except that everybody went to
I'm not
college.
sure how this could be helpful, but
That's right.
seems
I
like others
thought,
are doing it. Yeah.
yeah. I tell people I went to college to have a good time, and I did.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So it wasn't until I got married in college that I really settled down and began to have some purpose in life. If you looked at my transcript,
Right.
when I got married, I still had I'd been in school for 4 years, and I still had 3 semesters to go,
Oh, wow.
and I had to 4 point those last 3 semesters to get my cum up to 2 point,
Okay.
and then I
Took it
had
a
a
lot more seriously after you got married.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and then when I went to graduate school, I 4 pointed through graduate school, and so the recruiters would look at that and they say, "What happened?" And I said, "I got married."
Little thing called responsibility.
That's right. And I also grew up. My college years was Vietnam.
Oh,
Uh,
right.
it was the '60s, and most of a lot of my friends went into the military, but I had a student deferment, and then I had a marriage deferment, and then I had a child deferment, and so I never ever went into the military. But Vietnam was a big deal.
Yeah.
Uh, so, and I, and the '50s was a really, or '60s was a really traumatic time. It was when Kennedy was assassinated, Martin Luther King was assassinated, Robert Kennedy was assassinated. Uh, so when we look at what's going on today in the world, and I look back to that and I say, well, it's not a lot different than what was in the '60s. In fact, the '60s may have been more violent
Mm,
than what we're experiencing today.
yeah.
So I,
And
I've
the
got
and
the
the and
privilege, Jeff, and I'll stop. That now that I'm an old man, I'm 84, and I can look back and I can I can tell stories. Okay.
well, one of the things I love is that you are reflective about kind of the arc of your story, and I think you do live an examined life in the positive sense of that, and so that's part of the fun that I know everybody's going to enjoy, kind of hearing the arc, and there's some consistencies of you. And I'll just throw out one word, which is when I describe you to people, the word to me, the visionary thing is I always say Ron's a visionary, and I go like all of our strengths. It's also like you're to me, you're always 30 years ahead, right? Like it's awesome, but it's also not that easy, you know?
Yeah.
So maybe get into the business stuff, right? You start out in public accounting, right? I guess the numbers thing came easy. Is that what led you to the accounting side of things to start?
Well, I went into accounting in graduate school because there were a lot of jobs in
Right.
accounting. This was when they had the Big Eight at that time, and when I went to work with Pete Marwick we were hiring 2,000 college graduates a year.
Exactly.
Uh, and so it was a good place to be. And it was a good place to be also because about 80% of those 2,000 left the firm. And
Right.
it was intentional, quite frankly. They brought these young people in, and they trained them, and they went out and went on their own. And so uh, I knew that if I went into accounting, I would probably always have a job.
Yeah.
Uh, and it, but I knew that auditing was not for me when I was sitting in a bank vault counting securities. That was auditing.
Okay, this is a sidebar to all the geeky former auditors out there. I admit I'm one. I actually was sitting around two other people. There were three of us sitting there who were all auditors in the beginning of our career. It was the first time I had a discussion. What was the worst thing you had to count? We actually had that conversation last week. I feel like I won with Yugos, like the old Yugoslavian tiny cars on the ship channel, but I don't know. The guy with drilling mud, he might have come in a close second. But anyway, but it was great training. And like you said, they hire all these young people. Usually, you spend a couple of years there, and then maybe they climb the chain at another company to hire that
Yeah.
firm back. So you're at Pete Marwick, and you can climb the chain and hire them back. So that was, I think, kind of part of the deal.
Yeah, it was, and the 3 years that I was there was terrific experience because I worked in New York City on Wall Street, and then they transferred me to Dallas, which was a whole different culture,
Yeah.
and then they transferred me to San Francisco, which was another culture, and so I saw the country, if you will, and I saw the different cultures, and so I could always look back and determine whether I wanted to be a part of that or not.
Yeah. Right.
And decided that uh, I wanted to go back to Indiana. Two of us were in MBA school together. We're going to go back and start a CPA firm,
Oh,
and we were
it's
going
so
to
interesting. Yeah.
offer high level service to entrepreneurs and professional people. So we
How
did.
old were you when you did that? When you started that firm?
I was 28.
28. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah,
And
okay. And then how long were you there? I know it's still going in like a top 50 accounting firm in the US, but how long were you there?
I was there 7 years.
Wow.
And you know, they uh, they invited me back to
Yeah.
talk to their partners
Yeah.
a year ago. And that firm's now they got 500 people.
Yeah.
They're one of the top 50 firms size-wise in the country. And they made the decision that they were never going to be acquired. They were just going to build that firm.
Yeah.
So they were interested in what I was thinking when I
Yeah,
started the
your
firm.
original vision.
Yeah,
Your original vision, which they're probably living out pretty well, I would
they
think.
are.
Yeah.
They are. It's a terrific firm, great people, and I always felt like if you hired the right people, things would take care of itself. I
So
didn't have to
true.
know everything, but so I always hired for quality,
Yeah.
more so than skill, because you can teach the skills.
Yeah.
Um, and I had a vision that that firm would do well. I didn't realize that God was going to intersect at the time, and that was not in my plan uh,
Yeah,
because I
because you went to a nonprofit for a couple of years there. Tell us about what led you out of the accounting firm to do that.
my wife committed her almost died through a whole series of things and committed her life to Christ as a result of that. Went to a campus crusade, Friday morning Bible study, uh, and every Friday she'd pray to receive Christ.
Every Friday.
Every Friday.
Yeah. May
Somebody
not have
said,
taken last week. Yeah, I mean, just to be sure. Yeah.
so somebody told her, you only need to do that once. Well,
Right.
when she told me what she had done, I threatened her with divorce.
Wow.
And the reason was I was on a success track.
Yeah.
Jeff, I came out of a humble background and I wanted to be successful. Uh, and and that meant more, it meant money, it meant position, it meant influence. And so she was a real threat to me because of my experiences as a young person with the faith.
Okay. Yeah.
It was not positive. And
Right.
so Judy lived out First Peter 3, a godly wife, for 2 years, didn't say another word to me about faith. The only thing she did was ask if I would go to church with her, which I did. And every Sunday, we would go to the Sunday school class, and I'd hear this dentist who taught it. He'd say, "Now, if you're not a Christian, you're not going to understand what we're going to say today, because the Bible says that the natural man doesn't know the things of God." And so I'd listen. I'd say, "He's just a dentist." I mean,
Does a dentist know? Yeah.
what does he know?
Right.
Uh, but I couldn't explain away Judy's life.
Yeah.
And I was on my way to play golf, and somehow four spiritual laws ended up on my dresser. I took it with me to the golf course. I was driving to the golf course, and I knew exactly what I was doing, and I prayed, and I had heard the four spiritual laws, and I prayed, but I told the Lord I wasn't going to change anything. Now,
Classic.
the reason for that was I wanted it to be real. I
Oh,
didn't want a set of rules to follow.
yeah.
Um, and this is funny, but I shot a 36 on the front side. I said,
It
"Man, if
was a
I'd known
sign.
this,
It was a sign.
it was a sign."
God really does love me. I shot
Yeah,
even far on the front.
yeah, I got back on my game in the back
Yeah,
nine.
well, it's a
But when I made that commitment, I think, Jeff, as we were talking before this started, I was thinking of one of the things that when I look back on my life, I made some irrevocable decisions.
hmm,
Um, and I think that's important. When I received Christ, it was irrevocable. When I decided to leave really the business world and go into ministry, it was irrevocable, and it was really clear that God had called me. Uh, really clear. It was, and so I never looked back on the fact that I was in ministry. I didn't know what that meant, and it's taken many different forms over the years. But the other thing that was irrevocable, the third thing, was that God gave me a mission statement in 1979 that with my financial background, I could help Christians plan and manage their finances so that they would have more money to give away for the fulfillment of the Great Commission. That became my mission, and it's never changed, and it has resulted in, my old company, which is now Blue Trust and Kingdom Advisors and NCF and Ron Blue Institute, are the 5 things that I've been involved in starting. But it was always a part of that mission.
right.
And uh, just recently, uh, I was I heard that the National Christian Foundation, which Terry Parker and Larry Burkett and I started, gave away $3.5 billion last year.
Yeah.
My old firm, Blue Trust, their clients, they estimate, gave away about a $500 million last year. And and then we've got 2,000 people like yourself that have been trained. How much have they influenced? I have no idea.
That's a big number.
It's a big number, and I think, I planted, a whole bunch of people watered, and God gave the increase. And I got to live long enough to see the increase.
Yeah.
So I don't feel any real sense of accomplishment in the sense of, look what I did. what I do feel is, why me?
Yeah.
Why me? What a privilege I've had.
I
To meet.
want to continue that thought, but I have to go back to something real quick just for my own clarification. When you said when you were driving the golf course and you said you wanted it to be real, but you weren't going to change anything, what do you mean by that?
Well, I meant that if what I thought was to be true was true, change would come internally,
Okay.
and that
I'm
it
not going to
wouldn't be
artificially change something. I'm going to see if
right.
you really change it within me, right?
Right. It,
Okay.
it's kind of like this morning in my quiet time, and I was really fortunate. Speaking of quiet time, because I was discipled almost immediately. I was being discipled within a week of committing my life to Christ by a CBMC person, and and I had a lot of influence of people that were really spiritual. And one of the things that I started was to have a quiet time.
Yeah.
And you've heard me say it, I
Oh,
know many times, that if you're not having a quiet time, you don't have anything to bring
anything to
to the
say?
table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I tell people I wake up a hot mess. I got a laundry list of things I want God to just fix. And I want to get, I try to do the ACTS, adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication. Well, the asking's at the end, so I got to get through all those other things. Usually by the time I get through them, I'm like, okay, I'm a lot calmer. All right, okay. Back off my agenda, back onto yours. But I need it every day. Every day I wake up sort of selfish with my to-do list, and
Well, that's the way we're wired.
it's
I
so
do
true.
too. I mean, I wake up and I think, what do I have to do today?
Exactly. I gotta get my stuff done. I got my to-do list. So
That's right.
now I think one of the things that God's given you that's very unique is taking the complicated and making it simple. People talk about, I don't know, 2,500 verses, somewhere close to that in the Bible about money and possessions, talking about more than heaven and hell combined. Okay, well, that's a lot of material to synthesize down into some basic principles. So I think I would love for you to kind of share how you express those sort of consolidated principles.
Well, I do think, Jeff, that God wires us all differently, and
Hmm.
we're unique places in His plan. And I do think He has given. I didn't understand this for a long time, but I
Yeah,
do think He gave me the ability to take the complex and reduce it down into the fundamentals, if you
exactly.
will.
Exactly.
And um, but when I realized that, I said, well, that's what God has gifted me with. Don't lose it. Don't
Right.
ignore it. And uh, I was meeting with a pastor of a mega church in West Palm, and I said to him, this was a few years ago, and I said to him, I said, Tom, I said, I've been at this business now almost 50 years of helping people, Christians, plan to manage their money. And I said, I can tell you that God's word speaks to every financial decision or any financial decision that anybody would make at any time under any set of circumstances. And he didn't even hesitate. And he said, Ron, he said, well, if that's the case, why isn't the church perceived as a center of financial wisdom? And what a question.
Right.
Because I do believe that, and I know you believe that too. And uh, so I sat out and said, how are we going to solve that?
Right.
And then the Lord gave me shortly thereafter an opportunity to talk to another pastor, and he said, I'm getting ready to do a series on generosity. But he said, I got millionaires sitting in that audience, and I've got students deeply in debt, and I've got
Right.
widows. And he said, how do I speak about generosity to such a diverse group of people?
Great question.
And I tell people my favorite financial planning verse is James 1:5. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask.
Right.
And so I prayed that standing there. I said, Lord, what do I say? And God gave me a question that I had not thought of, but I said, Steve, I said, when you give a series on marriage, you're really talking to a diverse audience. I said, do you change it due to the diversity? And he said, well, no. And I said, Steve, the reason you don't is because you teach principles and principles don't change. And principles are transcendent to situations. And that's the beauty of God's word, is that it will never be old fashioned.
Right.
Never. It talks truth and principles. So I said, I bet you know more about money than 90% of the wealth advisors that I've met. Because there's 2,300 verses or so in the Bible on money, and you know them. You just don't know what you know.
He just hadn't codified them.
You
Just
hadn't
like you
cut.
would do a study for marriage. You go pull out the stories and you make your
Yeah.
principles. So,
Well, I called my daughter, who was kind of managing the intellectual property that I had at the time, and my son, Michael, and I said, I was getting ready to speak to a group of pastors for Dave Ramsey, and I said, put on one page everything I know about money that I could show to a pastor and say, this is what you know.
interesting.
And they put together what we now call the 4-H tool, and a pastor gets it in 2 minutes when he sees
Right.
it, because he knows all the scriptures that are there. He just didn't have them all put in the right place.
Organized.
Yeah. And all it was everything begins with the heart. So the heart is the beginning place of financial decision making. And you deal with the question of who owns it in the heart. And when you deal with that question, and if you answer the question that God owns it all, then you've changed your life and you started on a path of discipleship. Because all is all. And that's a terrific, it's a life-changing decision
Yeah.
that you make. And then the second thing is that there's only really 5 habits that you have to master. And the reason that I knew how important they were and how significant was, I was testifying before a congressional subcommittee one time, and a senator asked me, he said, what would you tell the American family about money? And I said, I thought to myself, he's going to laugh when I tell him, but I said, I would tell them to live within their income or spend less than they earn. I would say avoid the use of debt, because debt always obligates the future. That's your first priority in the future. Third, build margin into your finances so that you can meet those emergencies that are going to come, or opportunities that are going to come. And 4, set long-term goals so that you prioritize your spending in the short term versus the long term. Those are 4 biblical principles that you will find in scriptures. What I didn't say was the 5th is to give generously.
Right.
But I said the 4, and he repeated them back to me. He wrote them down and repeated them back to me, and then he said, well, it seems to me that that'd work at any income level.
Including the federal government, right? Did he say that?
Yeah, I did. I said, including the United States government.
Right.
But what clicked in my mind as soon as I said that was these principles really are transcendent from governments to businesses
Right.
to families to wherever. They're never going to change.
Yeah. The kind of immutable laws,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, so that's pretty simple,
Right.
Jeff. God owns it all, and there's only 5 things you have to master. And it's further simplified by the fact that there's really only 5 places you can spend money. We get confused on budgets, but if you can summarize them in, we call it live, give, owe, grow. You spend money to live, you spend money to give, you spend money to pay your taxes, you spend money to pay off your debt, and you spend money to save for the future. That's it. And if you can get a handle on those five, and I had a consultant friend tell me, he said, you need to put those in a pie chart.
Right.
And once I put them in a pie chart, it's real easy to calculate because you can look at your tax return and it tells you how much your income is, it tells you how much you give, it tells you how much you pay in taxes. Everybody knows what they're putting away for the future, and people pretty well know what they're spending on consumer debt also. So the only thing that they don't know is what they're spending on their lifestyle. But being a numbers guy, I know if I have my income and I take the four uses of money, subtract the four uses of money, what's left is what I'm spending on my lifestyle. And you
And
put that in a pipe.
that's that third H that I think you call that health, right?
Health. That's financial
Those
health.
four uses of, yeah.
And the beauty of it is that when you put it in a pie chart and convert it to percentages, all of a sudden you see your priorities.
Yeah. It's the old checkbook and calendar check, right? Of
It
what your
is.
priorities are.
Yeah. I remember when I did it for the first time and I showed it to Judy, my wife. She looked at it and she said, "We're doing okay, aren't we?" I said, "I've been telling you that for 35 years."
I'm glad the pie chart worked.
She says, "Yeah, but it was all in an Excel spreadsheet and I don't do Excel."
Exactly. Exactly. And then the
So,
last one.
well, the last one is that you can pretty well divide people's finances into five categories. One is you've got those that are struggling; they're
Mhm.
not even making it. Secondly, you've got those that are surviving; they're living paycheck to paycheck, and those two alone comprise about 60% of the population in this country, and about 60% of the population sitting in the pews. The third level are those that are stable, meaning that they have a positive cash flow. And then you've got those that are secure in that they're beginning to meet all their long term goals. And they're typically in their late 40s, early 50s by the time you reach that. And then the last category is those that really have a surplus, uh, way more than what they need, uh, and have the ability to do whatever they want to do. Um, but I do share with that group uh, that the more you have, the more complex life becomes because you got to
Hmm.
make a whole bunch more decisions.
Yeah. Be careful what you ask for.
That's right.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I
but
think that's super helpful to have those kind of four H's and I think I know before we started recording, we were talking a little about the Ron Blue Institute that you're active with now, trying to educate the church about this, and you kind of told where these four H's came up from, trying to describe this to the church, to anybody sitting in the pews. And you talked about how maybe that idea is ready for prime time, and so. Maybe can you talk about how the ecosystem has grown since you started this movement or started in this movement, and how you think, just kind of your vision for the future, because I think that's another real gift you have is kind of seeing the future.
well, when you look at it now, we've got 4,000 Kingdom advisors, 2,000 who have been trained at the highest level biblically, financially, like yourself. Um, we've got a lot of the um, ancillary organizations that are necessary. And the big ancillary organizations are in the investment world because people do need to make investments. And uh, Wall Street has been transactionally driven, but it's changing. And
Hmm.
it's changing to become more values based relationship with their clients.
Yep.
And Wall Street has accepted our designation of certified kingdom advisor and promoted it.
Yes.
One, we just did a study, and one of the numbers that came out was that the Christian advisor has a 98% retention on his clients,
Hmm.
compared to about 75% for the non-Christian client.
Wow.
And Wall Street's not dumb. They say that makes good business sense.
Yeah, being values aligned with your advisor is good business. There you
So
go.
they're now promoting our certification uh, because it's good for them.
Right.
Uh, and then we're in about 60 universities where we're teaching biblical financial literacy.
Yeah, it's awesome.
And we've got 12 universities that are offering CFP and CKA training
Yep. Kind of combo. Yep.
combo, and that's even permeated into the secular world. Like at
Right.
Texas A&M, they've got one of the biggest.
Well, we like to say that's, of course, I'm in Texas. We like to say that's the largest Christian university in America, but that,
uh,
yeah, little tongue
well,
in cheek.
it's interesting because Texas A&M, Texas Tech, Virginia Tech, all sent representatives to our last conference.
Right. That's right. That was
Uh,
cool.
so you've got that industry, and
Yeah.
it's a complete industry now. And the way I look at it, and you got generous living, you got women
Yeah.
doing
Yeah. That
well.
ecosystem that promotes generosity and helps
Yeah.
with it. NCF, like you mentioned before.
So we have a workforce that is highly trained that can go into the church
Right.
and legitimately give biblical advice, and it's not self-serving.
Yeah.
I I know guys like yourself, you've got all the business you can handle. You'll take new business, sure, but you're not going to go to the church looking to market.
Right.
And and we've got thousands of people like that now.
Yeah.
So I'm excited because I think that God brought us all this way for the church,
Yeah.
and we can go to the church. And we've developed tons of curriculum now, and we've modeled ourselves a little bit after youth ministry,
Mm.
which didn't exist in the 60s and 70s. It was all parachurch driven.
Mm.
And a couple of guys wanted to bring it into the church, and they've been successful, and they formed an organization called Youth Specialties. And it's kind of the go to place for any level of youth ministry.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're positioning RBI to be the go to place for any level of financial ministry
So good.
that's biblically based. So I'm excited and pleased that God's allowed me to live this long to see this happen because it's going to happen.
Well, it is. And you're usually one of the ones that sees it. So if you say it, I believe it. And
No,
but I also think it's just hard to get away from the fact that the church should be. We were talking about before we started recording how, a pastor was telling you that the church should be the place where you come for this wisdom. I mean, it
yeah,
is coming from the Bible, and I think it hasn't been.
no.
And so I think it can be. It can be.
Well, then we're approaching the pastor first and saying, here's what you know.
Right.
Okay. And what we're wanting to do is to empower them to be able to talk about money, knowing that they're not going to make a fool of themselves
Right.
and that they're handling it truthfully.
Yeah.
So there's terrific receptivity on the part of pastors. Um,
It's
because
amazing.
they want to help their people and they don't know how.
Amazing. Well, there's a lot of people listening to this, a lot of entrepreneurs building businesses who sit in those pews and probably don't hear much of this in the pews. I hope they do soon. Uh, but in the meantime, they have these platforms at work that they're trying to use for God's glory. And they hear your story of starting a couple for-profit businesses, some nonprofits. Somebody's done kind of amazing work that they would love to leave an impact like that. But we always try to give them a practical tip at the end of just something they can do tomorrow to take a step in the right direction. We don't have to go from A to Z tomorrow, but if they're going to take a step in the right direction to kind of steward what God's given them, uh, what comes to mind as a practical tip?
I'll give you one illustration of a good friend of mine. He was one of my first clients. He was a heart surgeon. He's retired now, but he was a heart surgeon. And he just had built $1 million home. And it was a spectacular home. This was in 1980. And
Yeah, that's what $1 million is real money.
that's right. And his question to me was, is it okay for a Christian to live in $1 million home?
Right.
And once again, God gave me a question to ask him. So I said, John, I said, what do you think God thinks about that?
Yeah.
He said, I don't know. I said, well, how much time are you spending a day asking him? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, are you spending any time in your Bible praying, listening to what God would have you do today?
Mm.
And he said, well, I don't have much time. You know, I'm in surgery at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Hey, Ron, that's why I got you.
That's right. And I said, well, John, what are you doing at 4 in the morning? He said, sleeping. I said, then you got 10 minutes.
Oh,
Get
wow.
up at 4.
Wow.
And I was with him last week. And what happened was he started having a quiet time every day. And about a year later, his wife said, he's spending 2 hours a day reading his Bible.
Wow.
God never allowed him to sell that home. And he put it on the market multiple times.
Oh, wow.
They led hundreds of people to Christ.
Wow.
In their living room. He's given away millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And the one thing I said, what do you think God thinks?
Right.
So the one thing I would say to anybody is if you're not spending time in the morning with the Lord, then you really don't have anything to bring to the day.
Yeah.
So I will say this too. I've read a book and I read it again this morning. And the book's called Humility.
Mm.
That'll bring you to your knees.
Yeah.
So my one piece of counsel is ask what God wants you to do.
Humbly come before the Lord and ask him.
Yeah.
As my buddy Terry Looper on this podcast once, he's got this great line. He goes, we have an unfair advantage as believers in this world. We have the God of the universe that's willing to tell us what to do if we will simply ask.
There you go.
Humbly wait for the answer. You know what I
Yep.
mean? And patiently.
Yeah.
I just think I love that framework, and I've adopted it, and I will attest to the power of it, thanks to mentors like you encouraging me to do that many moons ago. So, Ron, I can't thank you enough for your friendship, for your mentorship, for doing this today, and just for being a great example of long-term obedience in one direction. Thank you so much for your example.
I want to tell you, Jeff, you were one of the early ones to come on board, and I've never forgotten it. And we've had a great friendship for many years now, and I appreciate you, and I love you, brother.
Love you too, man.
Right.
And
Okay.
all right, well, thanks for being here, and thanks everybody for tuning in. Subscribe, share it with a friend, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.